Hello friends, it's Trailblazer. I've got another BattleTech tactics video for you about one of my favorite mechs, probably my number one favorite mech in the whole canon, which is the Falconer. I love the way this thing fights, I love the way it moves, everything about it is just fits with an aggressive, mobile style in the game, and so I think you're in for a real treat as we talk about some of the best ways to use it on the battlefield. If you take a look at the Falconer's stats, you will see what I mean. It moves 585, which is an extremely fast profile. In fact, it's as fast as a 75-ton mech is capable of moving in this period, and it carries an arsenal like a Caesar, basically, an ER-PPC, and a Gauss rifle, and 4 medium lasers. Better than the Caesar, though, the medium lasers are all pointing forward. So this mech hits like a Caesar, and it moves like a Wolverine. The place where it falls short, of course, is in defense. The armor is pretty light for a heavy mech of the 3050s, although it would have been medium to heavy for a heavy mech of the 3020s, but if you combine that with the mech's XL engine, it is not going to stand up to fire anywhere near as well as most other heavy mechs of this period. The lore says that it was based off the clan Thor or Summoner, and there is something to that because it moves exactly like the Thor, and given the firepower that it brings to the table, it really is one of the few ways that as an inner sphere commander, you can field something that has capabilities reminiscent of heavy clan battle mechs. It's definitely not equal to the Thor, but I would say that it is equal to some of the better variants of the Blackhawk, for example, which is an extremely useful clan machine. So probably the most important way to use the Falconer, and one of the most aggressive, is as a flanker. You run the Falconer and jump it up one of the sides of the map to try to angle it around your enemies as you advance with the rest of your body of troops. So as you can see here, with the Falconer's fast running movement, on fairly open terrain, I can get it started going up the right side of this map. And then eventually I'm going to be able to use its jump capability to go even further up and more quickly. So you can do this in maps with clear terrain. A lot of the time, it works best in maps that have fairly heavy terrain because the Falconer's jump capability will allow it to outpace mechs that are moving at just walking or running speed. What you're aiming to do with that maneuver is to try to get an attack lined up of the sort that you can see here, where I'm firing that Gauss rifle and PPC into the rear arc of a heavy enemy mech. It really is true in BattleTech, the old kind of saying that what you want to do is catch your enemies in a crossfire, because if you have them in a crossfire, then if they're turned towards one of your units, they're going to have their back to the other one, and they may be taking hits against their rear armor, which they do not want. The danger of setting up a crossfire, of course, is that they gang up on one of the separated parts of your force. With the Falconer, this is one of the great things about the Falconer, it's less likely that they'll be able to do that because the Falconer can make effective attacks from really long range. So it's going to take them too long if they turn around and try to close in on the Falconer. And you can see what happens a couple of turns after my enemy here tries to turn their stalker around to close in on the Falconer. I'm able to get some rear shots in against that stalker with my other troops in my main body, and the stalker goes down, and now the Awesome is trying to turn towards the Falconer. Not an especially good move, because, of course, I'm sneaking up behind it with a mech that mounts an LB-10X, and it's taken a couple of pretty hard hits in its rear torso. So my enemy is in an extremely bad position here, which is exactly the kind of position that you want to put them into with the Falconer. I should note, of course, that you can do similar things with a Griffin, like if you have a GRF-3M Griffin or a 1N Griffin in the 3025 period. You can also make these kinds of flanking maneuvers to get long-range shots at a good angle. The problem there, of course, is that the Griffin doesn't have close-range weapons of the sort that the Falconer does, so closing in on the Griffin and getting it at short range is a better proposition for your enemy than it is if you're playing with a Falconer. Those close range weapons are also useful in a pinch just by themselves. You can think of a Falconer as kind of like a combination of a Griffin and a Wolverine. It's got that long range flanking capability that the Griffin has, and then it has the close range backstabbing power of a Wolverine if you want to use it that way. That's especially useful if you want to go hunting light mechs. So as you can see here, in some situations you might want to treat the optimum range to get to a light mech as 3 hexes, because that's outside of the minimum range of your Gauss rifle, right? That 15-point hit from the Gauss rifle can really savage a light mech. So if you set yourself up at 3 hexes, you can hit with the medium lasers at short range and the Gauss rifle at unmodified short range. So you can see here, by walking up closer to the fire starter, I've given myself 8s to hit, which is a much better 2-hit number than the 9s that I would have if I had run right up to the thing. Of course, a Falconer's kick also does 15 damage, and that can certainly take down a light mech. But in this case, I'm judging that because the Firestarter has so many really short-range weapons, machine guns, and flamers, I'm staying out of effective range of those weapons by staying at a distance here. And you just want to keep in mind, of course, the Firestarter would also be able to kick back at the Falconer. And you really want to avoid taking damage with a Falconer if you can. So in this situation, I've judged that the safe path is to kind of remain in a little bit longer range, forego the kick, and do some extra damage without risking taking so much damage. Because once the Falconer starts to take damage, then its usefulness starts to get significantly reduced. You really have to watch your side torso armor when you're piloting a Falconer. If your right and left torso start to go down by 10 or more points, then you need to start being cautious. You need to really back off and stay at long range from your opponents, and not go in unless you have a really good opportunity or they are very close to being dead. Because once those side torso armors start being depleted, the mech is in serious danger of losing a side torso, which is obviously going to kill it with an XL engine. So watch your side torso armor and don't move in close against enemies that aren't much lighter than you. You can move in close against light mechs or less high performance medium mechs, but if you're moving in close against a mech that has a dangerous short range arsenal, you're going to get in trouble with the Falconer. So don't be tempted to move in close and use those medium lasers unless you have a safe opportunity to do so. If you're playing in a campaign, the Falconer is the perfect mech to put your elite and veteran pilots on and really get the most of their skills, because you're going to be jumping and shooting a lot. So you really want to have excellent gunnery skill to be able to potentially hit in turns when you jump. That's not so much true if you're playing a game that is balanced by battle value, because the Falconer's battle value is so high to start with that it's prohibitively expensive in terms of BV to put even a veteran gunner on that mech. Now, I've been talking about playing the Falconer as a member of a multi-role lance, but what about if you're going to play it in one of the best ways there is to use the mech, which is at the company scale? In that case, the best option is to make the mech kind of the spearhead of a cavalry lance that moves at the 585 speed. The first lance mate that I would combine with the Falconer is the Star Slayer, probably the Star Slayer 3D, although you could also use the 3C. The reason to include this mech with the Falconer is that it's an extremely hardy mech. It has full armor and a standard engine, and yet it brings plenty of firepower. It has an ERPPC to back up the firepower of the Falconer and kind of add to that long-range punch, but you can use it to kind of get in the way and soak up some damage that might otherwise go to the Falconer. You're going to want some crit-seeking capability, and what I would use in this regard probably is the Enfield 6J, which is a jumping version of the Enfield. Obviously, it mounts an LB-10X, which is an excellent crit-seeking weapon, especially to pair with the Falconer, because it's a long-range crit-seeking weapon. So the Falconer can really be used to open up holes, of course, in enemy armor with its punching weapons, you can use the LB-10X to help do that, and then switch over to cluster with the Enfield to start inflicting critical hits after a mech has been opened up by the Falconer's fire. And finally, if I'm playing a fast lance like this, I want to have one mech in the lance that's even faster than the others, and that's an excellent backstabber, so that again I can potentially catch an enemy in a crossfire between this backstabbing mech and the other mechs in the lance. You could use a Phoenix Hawk if you like. You could use a Chameleon, which is an excellent backstabbing mech. The best probably is the Wraith, which has an arsenal of pulse lasers, or something like a Night Sky, but really the Wraith is the gold standard when it comes to this role. And I just want to close out this video with a little more editorializing. There's a meme out there, there's an opinion out there that the Falconer is an ugly looking mech, that it is not attractive. I couldn't disagree more. I think that it's beautiful. I think it's one of the coolest looking mechs in BattleTech. Very cool chassis. It's kind of like a much awesomer looking version of the Hussar, which in my opinion was already a really cool looking mech, a very striking mech that we saw on the cover of Tech Readout 2750. Similarly, I think that the Falconer is really striking and cool, sleek looking. It looks like it moves fast, which is what it does. So I just think it's an awesome mech all around, and I wish you luck using it in combat because it really does perform.